Hi, and welcome to Get It Growing, the show for the Master Gardeners of Lafayette Parish. And I'm your host, Rob Trowick. And just want to welcome y'all to our show. Today we're going to talk about a subject that's impacting all of us, and that happens to be the drought and these extreme temperatures, because there are a lot of things that are going on right now with this and how it affects plant growth and development. So just wanted to start with that. And
So Rob, do you know how many days it's rained in, how are we doing as far as rainwater goes?
well, the truth of the matter is we've had a very dry year. If you go all the way back to January 1st, we've had approximately 25 inches of rain or so this year, with about 20% of that coming on one day that we had in April, where we had about 5 inches of rain in April. But beyond that, most days if we've had rain, we've just had barely traceable amounts, a tenth of an inch maybe, or something like that.
Is this normal are we seeing this in other places all across the state, or is it mainly in southwest Louisiana?
It's just about the entire southern part of the state is seeing this right now, and it's just it's causing a lot of things, not just from an agronomic standpoint or a horticultural standpoint, but there are one thing you mentioned is because of that, there's a water conservation ordinance that is in effect for Lafayette, where they have a lawn watering schedule, where they have figured out if you have an even numbered address, that you can water on certain days.
On Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, right? And odds are Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and nobody gets to water on Monday at all.
And
you can always do hand watering. That's the only thing that's allowed anytime.
Right.
This is for sprinkler systems and sprinklers in the yard.
And coming out, sprinklers, anything coming out of a tap. And the time that you're permitted to water is between the hours of midnight and 2 p.m. So you can't water at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which isn't recommended anyway, because the amount of water you're putting out for the most part is being evaporated before it even really does any good anyway. So the watering is permitted between the hours of midnight and 2 p.m. But
a way to solve this problem is timers. Don't you think, to put on especially your sprinkler systems? You can have your timer go off in the middle of the night when everybody's asleep anyway.
I think if you end up getting a fine from, say, for watering your lawn or out of schedule, I think it could probably easily pay for a timer on any or all of the faucets that you have around your home. And you can get these timers and set them to your faucets and set them for these days. And we'll go over these days again before the end of the show, in case you didn't catch them. So you have a pen and paper ready so that we can
you should get one of these in your bill too. Those come in our water bill.
Right.
So isn't there a rule for how much water you should water a plant, and because how much plant water should you put on a plant at one time?
Well, typically what you'd like to see is after a plant is established, you like to see infrequent deep irrigation or deep watering, as opposed to light, frequent applications of water.
I remember the Master Gardeners, they told us to put a pan out there, and when it gets to an inch, that's when you should measure till a pan gets to an inch, and that's enough water for it to permeate down into the ground.
Right, and that's a good rule of thumb, especially with the heavy clays. Now, if we lived in areas where you had more of the soils for more sandy or sandy loam type soils, you could probably go 1.5 inches, 2 inches, go a little bit deeper on that. But after about an inch, once it gets to an inch in that type of situation, then what you end up looking at with clay soils is you see a lot of runoff, and you end up wasting a lot of water in that sense.
And when I know that if you start having problems with plants, if you don't water deep enough, the roots need to be deep to establish a good, healthy plant. If you're watering only at the top of the soil, those roots stay at the top of the soil because that's where the water is, and you have a weaker plant. That's why many trees that aren't getting water during drought times fall over so easily, because they don't have those deep roots anymore. They weren't getting the water.
Exactly. The roots of plants are to an extent, they're gonna follow and go where the water is. They want two things. They want oxygen and they want water. And oxygen can be a limiting factor in how deep the roots will go ultimately, but if you water very shallow, if you do frequent irrigations, light frequent applications of water, then what you're going to find is that the roots are going to stay in that real shallow area, and that's as deep as those roots will ever go.
So that's why it'd be very good to have a timer and a watering system, just to let it go for at least an hour, for each section.
Exactly. Let it go for an hour, let it get down into the soil. Those roots will get well established in that area, and not only will it help as far as the conservation of the water and establishing the plant, but it will help the plant survive in droughty conditions later on, because those first couple of inches of water that you deal with, those, for the most part, that's what dries out first. I mean, you think about it, that's the first little bit, the top layer was going to dry out first. And so anything deeper than that is going to hold on to water for a longer period of time. And like I said, going back, you look at this, we haven't had, except for one instance, really going back to June had one day of rain.
That was it, one major day of rain.
And that was that one shower we had, I believe it was on the 29th, at the very end of the month, had depending on where you lived, between 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches of rain going up towards Crowley.
The June that we just had this past Monday, there was 3/4 of an inch.
Right. That was the rain that happened for the entire month. So so
we're way behind.
And so we're way behind exactly as far as this year is concerned.
This probably isn't a very good time to be planting plants, then, is it?
No,
new plants require much more water.
Exactly, that goes without saying. We always typically say that fall is the time for planting, but in this case and this year, that's almost, you can put an exclamation point behind that.
We don't even get those brief afternoon showers that used to.
That you could set your watch by.
Muggy.
It would sit there, and because a lot of times when you get those afternoon showers, and I was talking with a friend of mine on the phone when Baton Rouge happened to be getting just a quick afternoon shower, and they've been going through the same type of drought condition, but the temperatures were in the extremes, close to 100 degrees, just like they were here. And then all of a sudden, within 5 minutes of that shower starting, it went from 99 to 79, just like that, as far as the temperature.
That's the other thing, is those extreme the high temperatures that we've been having. I mean, if it was just drought, that'd be one thing, but we have this intense heat that we usually don't have at this time of year.
Right. The intense heat has really played havoc with a lot of plants, and it also has an effect on the soil temperature. And when I was looking over these soil temperatures, I actually had to call the research station, because I didn't think these numbers could be correct, but the day that we had our 1.5 inch of rain, before it had rained that day, they actually, at 4 inches, had a probe down in the soil, and it measured the temperature 4 inches down into the soil at 100 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
So it was as hot on top of the soil as it was 4 inches down into the soil. And it was because of that, it's because of that intense heat and no rain. Mm-hmm. It's because, and that lack of water played a major factor in the soil temperatures reaching that. The next day, the soil temperature, even though the temperature got up close to 100 degrees again, the soil temperature didn't get up to about 92 degrees. Mm-hmm. So whereas every day before that, it had been in the upper 90s, close to 100 for the last 10 days before that. So rain can play, or watering can play a big factor in reducing reducing that soil temperature and making it more friendly for the plants to grow in those areas. Because you want just like people want to be in those temperatures that are not that extreme. Plants are just like that in a sense.
I was visiting a friend this weekend in Arkansas who lives on a lake in Hot Springs, and they're having the same problems there that we are here. It did rain a little bit while I was there, like for 10 minutes. And but what she lives on the lake, and people that live on the water here could consider, she had a pump that pulled the water out of the lake, and that's how she watered her plants, so that it didn't have to run through the city water system. And I bet people on the river here or a bayou could do that if there was water in it.
Yeah, if you can definitely do something like that. You got to be careful of a lot of times with these pumps, making sure that what you're pulling in is fairly clean, or that you have some kind of a filter or a filtration system on it to keep contaminants from coming in and clogging up the pump. But that's an excellent way to avoid some of these high rates.
Never has any water in it.
Yeah. So and another thing to put in mind is one thing that people can do to reduce irrigation costs overall when we're talking about irrigating is adding a second water meter to your house that is considered an irrigation meter, or
people use it for swimming pools.
Right. Is considered, what they call it, as a non-return meter. And what that does is it's water that is not going to be returned to the sewer system or anything like that. So, because if you ever look at your water bill, one thing you'll notice is that probably 60% of your water bill, if not more, is that return fee that you pay on water that goes back to the city. So, one thing you might consider is if you have an irrigation system, or you're putting an irrigation system in, you put a lot of water out in your lawns, then what you might want to consider doing is adding a non-return meter. It's a cost at the beginning that a lot of people may not want to incur, but it pays for itself very rapidly.
There's also been neat methods of gathering rainwater when it does come. Rain barrels are becoming popular again, and people around here might worry about mosquitoes, but I know many of them have filters on top of it, so it goes straight into the rain barrel. There's no other way out, but I guess straight back up the thing.
Right. Yeah.
Up the thing. And another thing is, I saw on TV the other day where you could trench out your yard and put these massive water reservoirs, and it collects rainwater, and then you can use that to water your yard with also, if you're building a house, or even if you have enough space to do that with.
One of the new things they have on LSU's campus that the LSU Ag Center has put together is they call it La House, or Louisiana House. And one of the things that it has associated with it is that water barrel or cistern, as some people refer to them as. And what it does is it collects the rainwater from around the gutters, and it all goes into this large barrel. And they use that for not just irrigation of the lawn, but also for doing things like, it's actually used as, they can call it gray water. It's used in certain faucets throughout the house that are not going to be used for drinking water and things like that. So there are some different ways that you can use and conserve water in that manner. So, but that's one of the things you think, it was a method used way back when to gather water and hold on to it when for times when there wasn't water, and it's something that it's kind of coming back into, we forgot about it for a long time, and now it's coming back into play a little bit.
That's right, it is. Is there any difference in watering with city water versus is the gray water or the natural pond water, is that better for your yard, or
versus tap water or something? That is a question that I get quite a bit from a lot of people. I get it at the office all the time. People will call and ask if one's better than the other. I have noticed a lot of times that my plants do respond better to rainwater. That rainwater is probably the best source of irrigation in a sense. But when you get into a situation like this, my plants definitely prefer tap water to no water. So it's definitely one that you if you have a choice, rainwater is a better alternative. But you can definitely go and use the water from like I said, I would say that, like I said, rainwater that doesn't have a lot of the bicarbonates, that doesn't have a lot of the, say chlorine or fluoride, things like that that may have been put into city water.
Another thing you can do definitely is also mulch on top of the plant to hold the water in, and soaker hoses.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned mulching, because mulching is extremely important if done in the proper amounts. Now, if you want to mulch, you want to mulch in, say, for shrubs, maybe at the maximum depth, probably 3 inches or so.
Really?
At the maximum, and the maximum depth for, say, large trees.
What kind of mulch you have,
it can depend. If you use a hardwood bark or something along those lines, you can put a larger amount, because it's going to slowly break down and degrade. Pine straw you can put, because it's going to be a little more fluffed up, and it's going to kind of come down and break down, and it'll get to that 2 to 3 inch barrier. The thing you want to avoid is the mulch can be much easier to grow in than, say, the soil that's around it. So a lot of times tree roots or shrub roots will more easily grow into this material than they will in the surrounding subsoil. So what ends up happening is, when, say, we go through a drought like this, if you have too much mulch, then what will end up happening is you'll have basically these roots that have grown up into this layer of mulch. And I saw this problem on LSU's campus with their live oaks, because they were putting out too much mulch about 10, 15 years ago. And the roots were growing up into this like it was an artificial media, like it was an artificial soil mix that you often buy plants and containers in. And then what we ended up doing, they ended up taking some of that off, and the plants, it's like I said, it's great for conserving water. It's great for keeping that temperature down. And like I said, that the numbers don't lie when we're looking at this agroclimate information. That you can see exactly how hot the soil can get if you don't have say a mulch type material down. But like I said, if you have too much down there, you can definitely cause the roots to want to grow in there.
I have a question then. My neighbor across the street has a beautiful old live oak tree, but she has probably a foot of mulch matter that goes all the way up to the trunk. Is that just like, does that have to be pulled back somewhere?
It needs to be pulled back. You would like to see it pulled back at least a foot or so from the tree, because if you have it like right up against the base of the tree like that, you can end up with what's called a butt rot, where it'll cause, because that a lot of times that when we have rainy periods, that mulch will stay moist, and the trunks of trees are not meant to ward off continually moisture from the sides.
The same as almost soaking it.
Exactly. You want to be able to see the root flare, and having a foot is one of those instances where you have just a little too much. Another issue is, a lot of times what I see, a lot of times we often refer to it as volcano mulch, where it's like I've seen where crepe myrtles, where cities will plant crepe myrtles in the middle of an intersection, and then they'll put this mound of mulch on it, and it looks like it's going up to a volcano. So you don't want to be doing that and having it going straight up on the trunks of the plants. Exactly, it needs to be pulled back and level all the way around, because, like I said, it's great for water holding capacity and holding that soil temperature down. It also suppresses a lot of weeds, and so there are some great things about it.
So most of the moisture will go toward the plant instead of the weeds that it's not competing.
Exactly. So it keeps that in there, make sure that that's where the water goes and not to some other.
What about the new rubber mulches they're creating now? Do you know anything about those? Like I would think that it'd make it, if you continually plant in your garden, that wouldn't, if it's a good stable garden with permanent plants, that might be okay, but continually plants just going to get incorporated into the soil.
Right. That's one of the things. The thing about rubber mulches, any mulch, they always, when you go through getting a bachelor's degree or a master's degree in horticulture, you constantly get inundated with the fact that any mulch is a good mulch, regardless whether it's rocks or whether it's pine bark, whether it's pine straw, all these kind of things.
Shredded newspaper or cardboard or whatever.
Exactly. But the thing that I will always kind of pull back on as far as shredded mulch, or as far as the shredded rubber, the chrome rubber that's used, a lot of times it's used for car tires. And what car tires have in it that a lot of people don't realize is zinc. They have an extraordinarily large amount of zinc in there. And zinc is much like lead, arsenic, and some of these other, heavy metals. It's copper. It's a root inhibitor. So it can cause some root inhibition in that sense. It'll kind of like the roots will get up there and it'll cause a pruning of the roots.
As part of the crew of this, we had the video awards for AOC this past weekend. It was 2 weeks, a weekend before last. And we're proud to say that the Lafayette Parish Master Gardeners won the video award for Best Backdrop right here. There you go. And we'd like to thank Ann Bro for creating this beautiful backdrop for us. And
really appreciate everything she did for this.
And if you like our show, call it in. Let us know what you like about it, and please feel free to call the Master Garden or the Ag Center if you have questions about watering it. And we have a list of plants, don't we, about what better in arid conditions and
right. There's actually a form of landscaping that is, we refer to it as xeriscaping. It's XER. If you want to Google, you can.
But I thought xeriscaping was more garden, not necessarily dry scaping, but more landscaping for what your climate, just for your climate, so that it doesn't need extras to keep it sustainable.
A lot of times, even when we get into conditions like this, South Louisiana has gone through drought conditions and dry conditions before. So what you'll find a lot of times is xeriscaping can almost be synonymous with landscaping with native plants or plants that are proven to do well in this type of environment.
Right.
Or plants that don't require a lot of extra care.
Right. You can't grow many northern plants here because that would not be good xeriscaping. You'd take a lot of effort, or you'd have to have a greenhouse even for some of the cold set things.
Exactly. You'd have to do all. So if you xeriscape, if you use plants that are proven plants like crepe myrtles, azaleas, gardenias. Everybody loves the sago. And use these particular plants, you're going to find that more often than not, you're going to be extremely successful.
And many of the wildflowers are hybridizing now to make garden varieties, like the echinacea and the.
That's correct. And you're going to find if one thing you can kind of do and not go wrong is definitely look at a lot of the plants, annuals even, that grow well in the full sun, and that can kind of give you a tip off. If they grow well in full sun, then they're going to do well in this area without a lot of supplemental irrigation.
As I say, full sun, but frequent watering too.
So you kind of have to watch that. But remember, the Lafayette Utility Services has put out this a water restriction May 1st through September 30th, and on even days, or if you have an even address, you can water on Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday between the hours of midnight and 2 p.m. And if you have an odd address, you can water on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And again, no one waters on Monday. So, just remember that if you, again, even addresses on Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then odd addresses on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Again, no watering on Monday. And the watering periods are between the hours of midnight and 2 p.m., which that's going to force y'all to do a good job of timing and putting the irrigation out.
All right,
Thank you
so
very
the
much.
hoses are the best. So, all right.